Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Love in the Kitchen, a recipe for holiness. I hope you all had the opportunity to join us this morning when we had a live bake-along with Father Sammy Mileta. The quiche he made with us was delicious, and the coffee cake is presently cooling on the cooling rack. So if you missed Father Sammy's session this morning, please log in and check back tomorrow and watch the replay of the bake-along. Up next, and right now, Chalice is greatly honored to welcome Rita Heikenfeld to Love in the Kitchen to have a conversation with us about culinary herbs in the Bible and both their uses in cooking and in healing. I first heard Rita on EWTN and Sacred Heart Radio when she was interviewed on the Sunrise Morning Show. I was amazed by her insights and depth of knowledge on scripture and on biblical society and culture as well. She is truly a fascinating lady who's worn many professional hats, including that of herbalist, educator, media personality, speaker, journalist, and author. She shares many of her recipes and thoughts on her website, which is abouteating.com, and anchors her ministry in a deep faith. One of her central philosophies is very compelling, and I believe it closely aligns with the work that we do at Chalice. Rita believes in the law of abundance. Share your talents, encourage others. Rita, welcome to Love in the Kitchen, and thank you for sharing your talents with us today and sharing them with Chalice.
Oh, well, thank you again for having me. I'm so excited. And I noticed that you said herbal, and we talked about this previously. How do you pronounce the word her? Is it herb or herb? And as I told you, here in the States, we say herb. The H is silent, and you, along with many Europeans, say herb. So interesting.
It's my Polish background, Rita. My parents got married in London, but they were born in Poland. And I also, people say the arrow when they're turning on roads. I call it a traffic filter. Apparently no one does that. So
is that right?
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Rita. There's a chat bubble. I just want to make everyone know before we start in the session. If you go and look at the bottom of your screen, there's a little chat bubble that you get access to. If you don't see it right away, click more. If you've got any questions for Rita during the course of this session, put them in there. I'll try to keep an eye on that and I'll have a look. And if I can, and I have the opportunity, I'll ask your questions to Rita. So Rita, I want to start by asking you a couple of questions, but the first one relates to something that we were talking about just a little while ago. Before we went on, we were talking about marigolds, and I've got this here, which is calendula. So I think calendula and marigold are the same thing. You were mentioning a story that you like to tell to your family about marigolds. I'm guessing it's like a Catholic Mary story. Do you want to share that with us?
Yes, it's interesting. Calendula, by the way, is often called pot marigold, and the whole plant is edible. The flowers are beautiful oranges and yellows, and the marigold family, when you think, there you go, it makes a wonderful healing oil as well. So, and my mom, when we were growing up, used to put calendula marigold petals in her rice as a substitute for saffron. It's called poor man's saffron. But anyway, as far as the word marigold, just think of the two words marigold. And marigolds are representative of the beauty, the golden beauty of Mary. So I always have some calendula and little marigolds in my Mary garden.
It's beautiful. That was a mistake to put it in my mouth like that. I bought it for tea, and it's kind of dry, so I wouldn't recommend just eating them like that when they're dry.
No.
I finally got it.
Yeah, I thought you were pretty brave there. Yeah.
So how could that benefit me? I've read a bunch of things about marigold usage for like ointments and stuff like that, I believe, but what are some of the herbal benefits in terms of food and culinary purposes,
well,
other than the flavor?
Yeah, well, of course, the flavor. Let's talk about the flavor first. The flavor of different marigolds can be very pungent. The calendula is quite mild. Again, it can enhance your flavor profile of grains, rices, and such like that. Also pastas. I'll put some in soups, and it's as an ointment, it's very healing. You can make a calendula ointment or a calendula salve for sore muscles and just some arthritic pain or garden pain after a day's work in the garden. So it's a lovely herb, and really one that we tend to associate with our Virgin Mary.
So another story that I love is ladybugs. I actually posted on Instagram a couple of days ago a little picture of a ladybug crawling on my consecration chain from St. Louis Marie de Montfort. And I always love the story of our ladybugs being named after Our Lady, and they're so beautiful, and they're around flowers. What is your favorite Mariology or Christology story about herbs, culinary herbs?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I guess when I think, and we were talking previously, you and I, about basil. Growing up Lebanese, we called it hobbit, and we called mint, by the way, nana. But basil, my mom, I grew up in a suburban area, big Lebanese family, small house. There were 11 of us in a home that was less than 1,000 square feet. But mom always had a big black iron kettle of herbs outside growing. Basil was always one of them. And she would tell us the stories of basil and mint, but especially basil. And I remember this as a child, that basil was found after Christ resurrected, growing alongside his tomb. Now, basil, as far as being mentioned specifically in the Bible, it isn't, but you look at the history and where it's indigenous to, we know that it has been used for centuries. And so that would be, I think, when I think of an herb and the stories behind it, that would be the first herb I'm thinking of.
Perfect. Question on that. I could totally be wrong. I feel like I've seen holy basil as a name for something on like vitamins and stuff like that. Is that the same thing as basil and just based on that story? Or does that even exist?
Well, no, the basils, I think they comprise probably over 50 varieties. They hybrid different varieties. The sweet basil, the Genovese, is our mother plants, but the holy basils, what you're talking about, the Tulsi, the Nicobar, they can be used culinarily. They're used in teas for upper respiratory immune system, a lot in Ayurvedic medicine. So they're sort of used interchangeably, but the holy basils I think are in a distinct, like, cousins of the sweet basils, but used more medicinally. And here's a little tip. A lot of people, some of the holy basils like the Nicobar and the green look just like the regular basils, the culinary sweet basils. But if you look closely at the holy basils, they're both members of the mint family with their square stems, but the holy basils will have little tiny hairs along the stems. So that's a good visual if you're not sure what you're looking at. And of course, the flavor profile, sweet basil, clove and licorice, and then the holy basils, to me, have more citrus and more of a menthol flavor.
So are they even in the same family of
Yes.
herbs?
Yeah, they are. They're both both members of the mint family, with, as I said, with their square stems, but they have different usages. And I consult with a nursery here in greater Cincinnati, and we have lots of basils that we grow. It's really fun to see our clients, especially those from India, always ask for the Tulsi, the holy, the Nicobar basils, so along with the sweet. So it's just fun. Wonderful herb.
Perfect. I was going to mention that one of the facilitators along with us today is going to be posting some of the scriptural passages. We mentioned something specifically in the Word of God. So if you're watching along with us and you hear us reference a scriptural passage, check out your chat and you'll see the reference to it there. I'm about to make reference to one of those passages. So talking about similar related herbs, under the mint family, you've got peppermint and spearmint. And it's actually mentioned specifically in Luke 11, verse 42. So it says, "Woe to you, Pharisees, because you give God a tenth of your mint and rue to all other kinds of garden herbs." But I'm not sure what they mean by rue to all you other kinds of garden herbs. I wouldn't mind hearing your insights on that. But you neglect the justice of God. So that's being posted there now. So the first question is peppermint versus spearmint. I love mint. I don't like spearmint at all, or at least a flavor. But are they very closely related? I know that they both have that kind of like mintiness, but the flavor profile is really different to me. Is that just my palate?
No, no, you've got a very discerning palate, I would say. Well, first of all, when we think of mint, and I always joke that wouldn't it be nice if we could tithe with mint as far as part of our tithe instead of money. But anyway, above and beyond that, there's some debate among biblical scholars as to what is the biblical mint. Some biblical scholars feel that it is the field, the horse mint, the water mint, which is a peppermint. And then there's another mint called Habeck, Habek mint, and it's got gray-green lance-like leaves, very menthol in aroma, not a great culinary mint. And then I grow that in my Bible garden, and some Bible scholars think that's the true mint. To me, being Middle Eastern, Lebanese growing up, we used peppermint. And we used it in not so much sweet applications, but we would use it in our tabbouleh, in our kibbe, in our grains, and in our salads. Peppermint, between peppermint and spearmint, peppermint has a very menthol, medicinal taste and aroma, and that's what you find in peppermint teas, for example. Spearmint, if you go to the local grocery and they have it in a blister pack or dried, it will probably be spearmint, unless it says peppermint, and it's sweeter. And to me, the aroma doesn't carry through in cooking. But all mints are great for your digestion. And they clear the air too. I make a peppermint spritzer with water and peppermint. And when I teach my classes, I'll spritz them in the air. So everybody, I always say, stays awake and is clear-headed. But mint is just a wonderful biblical herb. Mint, as you said, mentioned in the Bible in Luke. And it's very invasive. If you grow mint, if you don't have it in a pot, she will go everywhere. So that's one of my favorites.
Mint is one of the herbs that I've been able to keep alive. It grows. And basil I'm pretty good with as well. They need a lot of water. They're very water intense, I find, with mint. Out of all of these herbs, if you were a beginning herbalist, if you were beginning your journey with herbs, which would you recommend for novices?
Well, I think first think about the way you like to cook. Basil, everybody loves basil. Parsley is a wonderful herb to grow. Ancient history, not again mentioned specifically in the Bible, but we know it was used during Bible days and grown because of the way we use it today. And parsley is like a vitamin pill in a plant. It has calcium and iron, just wonderful nutritional qualities, easy to grow. Thyme would be another one. Thyme, because when you buy thyme in the store, if it's dry, first of all, it's expensive. And when you grow your own herbs, you get not just a season, but years worth of value from them, because you can use them fresh, dried, etc. Thyme is almost like a medicine chest in a plant. It's very antibacterial, and it's got a distinctive flavor. Thyme is sort of peppery. I don't know if you use thyme in your cooking, but it's a wonderful perennial herb, so it grows quite easily. And another one I love, and I know you love, is dill. With your heritage, dill. And I have a Hungarian friend who I don't know if you know this tip. She was a wonderful cook. She did Polish and Hungarian cooking. And here's how she preserved her dill. And by the way, dill has a lot of calcium in it, so it's a wonderful herb, easy to grow as well, even in containers. She would take whole dill sprigs and take a glass jar and sprinkle some salt in the bottom, and then wrap the sprig of dill around on a layer of salt, and then just build up the layers. Salt, dill, salt, dill, salt, dill, salt. And she put it in the fridge, and then in winter, when she went to use it, she would pull the dill sprigs out. The salt was flavored with dill, and the dill was still quite green. So it was limp, it wasn't quite as crisp, but something I learned from her. And it's a great way to preserve dill. Yeah, so we've got basil, thyme, dill, parsley, sage, rosemary. Oh my gosh. And I know rosemary is one of your favorite herbs, right?
I love the smell of it. I don't cook with it as much. I think in Lebanese food it's used very commonly, is it not?
Yes. Oh, yeah. You think rosemary with lamb. Rosemary tea is very healthful as well. It does have a real piney flavor when you think of rosemary. And you can chop it up and use it in roasted potatoes, or of course in soups or stews. And you can mix it with another biblical herb, hyssop. And you and I have chatted about this before too. The sweet hyssop, it tastes a little bit like licorice. Hyssop and rosemary tea is wonderful for your immune system, and even a calming tea as well.
Yeah, there's a quote that we'll have posted now in a moment talking about hyssop. And hyssop is mentioned in scripture with regard to the Passover. Moses tells them to take hyssop and dip it in the lamb's blood from the Passover meal and put it around the lentils. And I never would have envisioned an oregano plant as being used for that. So there's some debate. Do you want to let us know a little bit about that academic debate about hyssop and oregano?
Yeah, well, as you and I were laughing about previously, chatting about, neither of us were there, and nobody who is alive today was alive at that time. Again, the biblical scholars who I've researched, there's a debate about what the true hyssop is, because supposedly hyssop, the sweet hyssop that we grow here with the large leaf licorice flavor that's just lovely in teas, really wasn't indigenous to that area supposedly. But of course, oregano was, and oregano grew wild everywhere there. So they think that perhaps it might have been a sprig of oregano and not the hyssop. And when you think of oregano, especially the Greek oregano, it grows straight up, very sturdy stems. It makes sense. But again, oregano, talking about how to use it in cooking, I use it, of course, we think of pizza and pasta, and it's delicious. It's got a very strong smell and aroma. So you want to use it, put it in the first part of your cooking time, where herbs like basil, you want to add the last 5 minutes so you get an explosion of flavor. But oregano is just a wonderful herb to use all around. It's easy to grow. And again, the health qualities are just immense. And I have different kinds of oregano. I have the Greek, which is the gold standard, and also Italian, which to me has more of a floral aroma as well. So yeah, it's a debate that will probably go on long after you and I have flown to heaven, hopefully. So
hopefully, I'm sure you will, Rita.
I don't know. I don't know.
Talk about like debates. That passage on the mustard seed, I'm going to mention it now, because the oregano I wouldn't have thought of. The mustard seed one actually kind of confuses me, because Jesus says that the mustard seed is the smallest of all the seeds, but it becomes one of the biggest of all trees. And I love those whole mustard seed mustards, right? When you kind of get them in the full seed there. But I've done a little bit of gardening, not much, because I like plants as well, and flowers, and like some flower seeds are like tiny. And I don't think that the mustard seed is the smallest of the seeds, but scripture tells me, so I'm confused. Should I be confused? Am I missing something?
No, it's interesting, because again, when you think the mustard seed is depicted in scripture, back then, supposedly, again, I will say supposedly, it was the smallest seed, or one of the smallest. And it does grow to be beautiful. And the interesting thing about mustard, first of all, it will help you use less salt, because it has a natural amount of sodium in it if you have mustard, or either the dry or even make your own. And the mustard seed itself, it has a lot of vitamin C actually too. But what I was going to tell you, I just lost my train of thought there. I need some rosemary. The mustard, anything in the mustard family, whether it's cabbage, broccoli, kale, mustard, if you look at that tiny flower you were talking about, that little yellow flower shaped like a cross, it has 4 petals. Wonderful lesson for children. So members of the mustard family are very good for your health. We know they're anti-cancer. They're really just wonderful. But when you look at the petals, they will always be in the shape of a cross. And of course, remember the flowers of culinary herbs are edible. So if you have an herb that's edible, like your favorite dill, The flower heads that form, of course, are edible. So does that make sense about the mustard?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. But I find this interesting. One of our speakers tomorrow is Amy Bourgeois, and she's going to talk about nutrition and health. And one of the things that she incorporates into her dietary practice is, an awareness of things that cause inflammation and immune response. And she employs an elimination diet to kind of get rid of some of those things which are not beneficial to the diet. And I've had conversations with her in the past about modifications for food. So what's happening to like these seeds and these herbs? Is this just natural progression and evolution, if you will, for these trees? Or is it our intervention? And does it really change the structure? Or is it more an aesthetic thing? When you look at the transition from biblical herbs to contemporary herbs that are not the same.
So, well, again, that's an interesting point. When you think of herbs, and I don't believe as far as when you think of modified, I think there's been a lot of hybridization, and, variations, just like because humans are curious and that's what we do. But I still think, going back to basil, for example, lots of varieties of basil, like the lemon basil, and the lime basil have tones of citrus. They still have all good health qualities. And parsley is one that hasn't been tampered with too much when you think of parsley. Again, like a vitamin pill in a plant. And there's regular parsley, curly parsley, flat leaf Italian, and then parsley root, which a lot of Eastern Europeans, the parsley root, put in their soups. I don't know if your family did growing up, but it's the root used more than the tops. But the Italian and curly parsley, and I'm going off script a little bit here, but I find this interesting. I grew up with the curly, and it's a little more pungent than the flat leaf Italian. So in cooking school, we're always taught to use the flat leaf Italian. They're both biennial, so they have the leaves the first year. The second year they send up flowers and seeds. But if you take the leaves off and you still have the little the stems, throw those in the freezer. They are great for your stock. And again, they will add flavor and nutrients. So what's your favorite parsley? Do you like the flat leaf or the curly?
I don't get much flavor from parsley. Like I kind of find it, you talk about my discerning palate. When it comes to parsley, I don't discern much, to be honest with you, or perhaps I don't like what I discern. It's not something I commonly have. Unless it's already there and placed there, I'll eat it. But it's not my favorite, I will admit.
Is that right? Well, it's such a common herb, and that's the one herb that I would never dry, simply because it's available all year round. But gee, that's funny that you said that, because parsley in our tabbouleh, or tabbouleh, however you want to call it, the national salad of Lebanon, you have to have parsley. Yeah. So, and I love that flavor. I think it tastes sort of, I don't know, menthol isn't the right word. I don't know. I can't describe it, but I love it. But it's interesting that that's not one of your favorites.
No, I wholly retract my statement, Rita, because I actually love tabbouleh. But tabbouleh to me doesn't taste like parsley that's kind of thrown as a sprig on the side of a plate. I just find them so different. I don't know what the cooking process is for tabbouleh, but it's amazing. And Lebanese food in general is phenomenal. So I'm with you on that. Yeah, I don't want to misrepresent what Amy said. Most of the conversations I've had with Amy relate to like protein modifications and stuff like that, and some of the more commercialized foods and dairies and stuff like that. I haven't had that conversation in relation to herbs and stuff like that, but it's good to know that most of what we get is pretty similar to what would have been initially grown. So that gives me a little bit of comfort. With regard to these herbs, what would you say is the underdog herb? Like if you could recommend something, the herb to somebody that they probably never heard or never bought or never grown, what would you recommend?
Oh my gosh. Geez, there's so many, because I love the weird herbs that that we're not so much familiar with. Okay, here's one. Some folks love cilantro, some folks don't. And cilantro, the seed head is coriander, mentioned in the Bible as like manna, it fell from heaven. But cilantro has a constituent in it that if you're sensitive to it, it sort of tastes like soap. People are not crazy about it. It's also in my climate where I live in southwestern Ohio. Cilantro loves heat. It's a very healthful herb. It cools a hot tummy. That's why it's used a lot in Asian and South African and foods that have a lot of peppers and heat with them. It also helps pull heavy metals out of your system. But here's the deal. It loves sun, it hates heat. It hates heat, so it's going to bolt to seed quick. So you either have to let some of those seed pods fall into the ground. So every few weeks you have a fresh supply. And by the way, cilantro is one of the herbs that you can always use the stem of as well. Very tender. But there's an herb called Vietnamese cilantro or Vietnamese coriander. Have you heard of it?
Coriander, but not Vietnamese coriander, no.
Okay. Oh, it's so fun. It looks like smartweed. It looks like a weed, and it's got lance-like leaves, sort of green with maybe a little reddish tint, and it grows low. It loves the heat, and it has a very strong cilantro-like flavor, not coriander, not lemony, but cilantro-like. So if you love cilantro and can't find it in the store or can't seem to grow it, Vietnamese cilantro would be one that I would recommend. It grows in the ground or in a pot. It doesn't require much at all. And there's another herb too called lovage. Are you familiar with that?
Nope, never heard of it.
Now, are you familiar with Campbell's soups? You know, the canned soups that we buy in the store?
I'm a bachelor, Rita, so I'm very familiar.
There you go. Well, here's the deal on that. Lovage is a celery substitute. It's a perennial herb. It looks just like celery. It doesn't develop the stalks, but it has thin stalks, and then it has the leaves. And I have heard that Campbell's soup uses lovage because it's such a strong celery flavor in their soups when they make them. So, but again, it's a wonderful perennial herb, celery-like flavor. You can add it to your vinegars, and sometimes celery will get gumpy in the fridge. Lovage grows in just about any climate. It can be dried. You can use it fresh. You can freeze it. But it's called lovage because back in the Middle Ages, it was actually used as an aphrodisiac. But it has a lot of minerals and vitamins in it. Easy for anyone to grow. So I think that would be fun. It grows sort of tall, and it looks like dill. The flower heads are yellow and just beautiful. So I guess those would be the two that maybe folks aren't familiar with that are really easy to grow and delicious and healthful as well.
No, it's sounds like the lovage sounds very versatile in its application.
Yes.
So I want to step back to something you mentioned a couple of minutes ago. We had a question from someone in our audience who was, and you had mentioned some of the cleansing properties of cilantro, I believe, which I think Father Leo will be cooking with this evening for our stir fry, if you're tuning in for that. But have you ever seen anyone healed by usage of herbs and different spices from that health perspective?
Oh, as far as just generally?
Yeah.
Yes,
anyone in
I
need of-
would think, here's my take on culinary herbs, and a lot of the biblical herbs, of course, have culinary, a lot of them are culinarily used, but there's not a culinary herb that you ingest that doesn't do your body some good. Whether I always say it's good for body and soul. Take lavender, for instance. It's a very calming herb. It means to wash. But it's also used in the spice blend herbs de Provence. So as far as the medicinal qualities, going back to parsley, which I seem to talk a lot about, again, like a vitamin pill in a plant, it has more cup for cup, more calcium than milk. It has iron, it has chlorophyll, and parsley is so easy to buy and to use. I always encourage people, even if you're heating up a can of soup, say, throw a few fresh parsley sprigs in there. And if you have someone in your family who's green challenged, take them out after the soup is heated. It will have done its magic. So yeah, just generally speaking, I don't think there's a culinary herb that you grow that doesn't have some benefit. And remember, not just physical, but emotional and spiritual as well. Because when you go through an herb garden, especially the Bible portion, and remember those who have trod before us and used those herbs, and the aroma that comes, it's very settling, it's very peaceful. And it's just, again, in these times that are rather challenging for a lot of us, you go back to herbs and flowers and plants, Garden of Eden. That's why it was, God designed it, designed all these wonderful plants for us to use as healers and as sustenance.
Yeah, with regard to the aromas, would you mind talking a little bit more about herbs and biblical ingredients for use in essential oils and for aromatherapy and what have you?
Okay, well, let's talk about cinnamon. Now, that's, of course, from the bark of a tree. And you and I were talking about how herbs have evolved, and you have the different varieties. Cinnamon, cassia bark, Vietnamese cinnamon, that's one that people don't usually mess with. It's from the bark of a tree, so it stays pretty pure. Of course, the cinnamon aroma, people love that because it's calming and it reminds us of usually a homey kitchen. But the cinnamon oil that's made from the bark of the tree is very healing as well. And now they're using cinnamon when you think of, lowering cholesterol and blood sugar, that it has some properties there. But just the aroma of cinnamon is very calming. And as I said, being Lebanese, again, we use cinnamon more savory, like we use it in our green beans and in our kibbe. And we make, of course, the baklava, the bitlewa that we make, we use cinnamon. And you can put just cinnamon sticks in some hot apple cider. It will have a calming effect and just a general overall good feeling. I'm thinking of mint. We talked about mint. That aroma is so energizing. And now I have heard that when people are waking up from surgery, some holistic doctors are actually having some essential mint oil, perhaps spritzed around with a carrier oil or some water, and to help people wake up not so frantic from surgery. I've heard that. So the aromas are very strongly associated with, I think, our history. Like when I smell basil or hobbit, I am transported back to my mother's kitchen, just like cumin, that seed that's mentioned in the Bible that has a lot of iron and I think some calcium in it as well. Cumin is a biblical spice, delicious, and we use them in Southwestern, Asian, Middle Eastern cooking, just about everywhere. But when you smell that, you associate aromas perhaps with your childhood. So yeah, it's just a good thing.
I really love the Eastern Byzantine liturgies and their spirituality. Like myrrh and frankincense, these things are mainly tree saps, are they not?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. What?
I love the Byzantine kind of spiritualities and using incense, like frankincense and myrrh. They come from tree saps, do they not?
Yes, they do. Myrrh, you think of, yes, it's a sap comes from the sap of a tree. And the incense, they call them the tears, because when the sap dries, it sometimes dries golden in the form of and it looks like little tears. I love when I go to church and we have the incense. That just, to me, is so calming. And it's popular because now folks buy, they for millennia have bought or made incense homemade or bought the incense sticks, and they will usually have some myrrh and some cinnamon in it. And when you think of myrrh too, it's a very healing plant. Well, the bark, that myrrh itself is sometimes even used in toothpaste for its cleansing qualities. So yeah, those ancient spices, I would say, and some herbs used in incense have their place in today's society for sure.
You can get different soaps. I've got a moisturizing cream that smells like frankincense, and I've also bought someone a soap bar, so you kind of walk around smelling like the sacraments. It's quite interesting.
Oh, that is good. And they were also used, I believe, cinnamon, when you think of some of the herbs and spices used medically and for food, were also used in ancient times during Bible times in embalming as well. And nobody can figure out, of course, the secret of embalming when you think of the Egyptian mummies, but they all had some herbs and spices involved in that, whatever that mixture might have been. So they made use of herbs and spices and the plants, God-given plants in many ways. And that's what I encourage my kids and grandkids and family to do too. And that's why I love the herb garden, because they'll all be over tomorrow for Father's Day. And so we'll have the little ones go out in the herb garden and we'll pick some herbs for the food that we fix. And then of course I like to tell the story. So it just brings a way to augment our family life and to bring what means being Catholic home.
Man, I love these stories, like the ladybug story, the marigold story. Will you share with
Yeah.
us another story? Because there's so many of them. I'm sure you've heard them all. So please share with our audience some, because I just think they're phenomenal. Great learning opportunities.
Yeah, I'll tell, yeah, the stories, I mean, our stories are connected with our history. And if you remember as a kid, what do you remember most about food and eating? I always say it's not just about the food, but who sits in the chair, or who eats with you. And I encourage that family table talk, because I always said, I think the kitchen is the most nurturing part of the house. That's where the kids will tell you things that you'd never hear in the living room watching TV, or sometimes in the car driving them to sports. So yeah, it's a wonderful place to be.
With regard to kids, what are there any particular herbs that you'd recommend for kids? So growing with the kids, or kind of like as a family garden herb?
Oh yeah, easy ones. Think of the herbs and also plants, excuse me, that grow quickly. I always let them have a salad garden, because you think of, when you think of the Passover meal with the bitter herbs, arugula could be one of those. But even those mixed green packets of seeds for salad greens, they come up in 7 days along with the radishes. And when the radishes flower again, you have that 4-petaled, beautiful cross-shaped flower. Mint is really fun for kids because it's a sweet herb. And the basil, think of herbs that they might like as a favor profile. And what I like the little ones to do is I'll let them sniff and feel and taste. And then it's always funny, because when they taste peppermint or spearmint, it smells much sweeter than it tastes. So they'll take some peppermint with maybe some lemon verbena, and roll it together and then chew on that, sort of like a chewing gum. But I again think of the way you like to eat, and think of herbs that are easy for them to grow and something that's quick to harvest.
It's we have a question actually from one of our viewers, and maybe when we're off camera, I'll tell you a great story about my mom eating a rose and putting the whole rose in her mouth to prove a point about its edibility. It's a great story, but I'll leave that for another time. The question
Okay.
that the person asked is kind of in the opposite direction. So you mentioned some of the edible flowers, but the person in the audience was wondering, can you eat all the parts of the lavender, or is it just the flower that's edible?
No, the leaves are edible as well. And here, my take on that again is I believe that the natural sugars go up through the plant. So to me, the flowers of culinary herbs are much sweeter than the leaves. You might have a different palate experience than I do, but yes, the herbs, the flowers of all culinary herbs are edible. There's a lot of different flowers that are grown that are edible, like we talked about roses. Those petals are certainly edible, and they're also used in spa products because roses are very astringent. And as far as like edible flowers, you have the pansies and the violas, and those are wonderful in a Mary garden too. Snapdragons, you can call it, what is an herb? Any useful plant is an herb. That's the definition. And in my Mary garden, I have snapdragons, and the little kids love to put their little finger in the petals, and it'll snap over their fingers, and that's why we call it snapdragons. But the analogy is they look a little bit like Jesus's little slippers. So yeah, many I would say the flowers, I know that the flowers of culinary herbs are edible. How to get the flavor profile, taste a little bit, smush it between your fingers, give it a sniff, and see if you like it and see which is stronger. But yes, they're both edible. I went on and on about that. I don't know why. Yes, they're edible.
Oh, it's awesome. It's amazing. I'd love to hear more about your married garden. So admittedly, you mentioned lavender. I can never, in Calgary, I don't know why, maybe it's too dry. Lavender never ever grows. I've only ever killed it. The seeds come up and the spring just drops. But with regard to a married garden, would you mind telling us a little bit more about it and how you'd recommend setting it up and giving us any useful advice?
Oh, sure. First of all, going back to that lavender, lavender likes it hot and dry. So it needs really good drainage, and she's pretty particular. So good drainage, hot and dry. Then you'll have beautiful lavender. She doesn't like wet feet. For a married garden, and a married garden can even be in a terrarium, depending on where you live and what you have available to you. My married garden is in the south corner of my herb garden, and it's under a dogwood tree. And I have a grapevine curling up around my old tractor bucket there too. So you would of course want a statue of Mary, and it can be a stone, it could be a large, it could be a small one. It could be a drawing that the kids make, and you can enclose that in plastic. Doesn't have to be fussy. The herbs and flowers that we think of, like snapdragons, marigold, Mary's gold. There's an herb a plant called Mary's bedstraw, and it's analogous to the straw that was put in Jesus's manger. You could also put thyme in there, and there's different thymes. The herb thyme, there's what we call steppin' thymes, real tiny leaf, tiny flowers. You can step on that. And it's great for a container garden because the thyme does not grow very tall. And again, that was one of the bedding herbs. We think the legend is that Mary put thyme in Jesus's bedding. And garlic, of course. I know, garlic and shallots and leeks. The garlic forms a beautiful background with its lance-like leaves, real tall. And the bitter herbs, when you think of Jesus's sorrows, like horehound, horseradish, those would be lovely too. Horseradish needs a lot of room to grow though, and horehound sort of spreads. But the mints, the basils, there's different varieties of basils that are small that grow as well. So I'm just trying to visualize what's in my Mary garden now. I have cardoon, which is a thistle-like plant. I have an olive tree in a pot. I have a pomegranate tree in a pot. You think of those trees, those biblical trees. I also have some cardamom and a carob tree. Remember St. John and the locust when he was in the desert, and he ate the carob pods, so that he could live. Just different things. And again, it can be as fancy or as big or as small as you want. The main thing is each plant that you put in there, you tell the story and have the little ones nurture that. And they'll have some culinary herbs in there as well. So, you're going to feed your body as well as your soul.
That's beautiful. I'm going to share a little bit of a story. I can't speak much to many of these herbs because I'm not a chef like you, but pilgrimage is one of the things that I have a great passion for. And I know a guy who may have gotten in trouble at coming back into his country because when he was in Fatima, he jumped over one of the fences and got one of the pine cones from underneath one of the trees that was massive and growing over one of the places where Our Lady appeared in Fatima. Of course, you can't bring seeds back from other countries. It's kind of frowned upon. So I wouldn't recommend that, whoever this guy is. But for me personally, when I go on pilgrimages, oftentimes I'll look for plants that are in those pilgrimage areas. So I'll get the seeds and then plant them when I come back in my garden. And then part of the story as well is not just the story of the plant and the herb, but also the story of where the plant came from and what the connection is to that particular place. So I don't know if you've ever heard anyone doing it, but I love doing it. And I think it's a great way to kind of bring that place back into your garden.
Oh, that's fascinating. and then it brings it back home with you. And so it stays alive in your memory and also everyday life. That's really great. I also have a caper plant. And you think of capers, they were found carbonized in Egyptian tombs, and they were wonderful biblical bud. What we eat are the buds of the paper or the caper bush. And I've heard that the caper bush just grows in hot, rocky climates and in between rocks. So you think of sometimes the challenges that we have in life, that we're in a hot, rocky place, speaking in like in an analogy, but then what comes from that is just like the caper bush, beautiful little buds that we can eat, that we pickle and eat, just delicious. So you and I were talking the other day about what was the herb that we were talking about? Oh, coriander and cilantro, and the analogies behind that, and also what was the other herb about? Oh gosh, I just lost my train of thought. Where power fails. What was it?
It's yeah, we were talking about the blossoms. It's one of the first quotes that you sent me, Rita. When power fades, desire fails when it falls on the ground. I'll find that passage for you here. It is capers. So the quote is from Ecclesiastes 12, chapter 12, verse 5. So when one is afraid of heights and terrors are on the road, the almond tree blossoms, which apparently is capers. The grasshopper drags itself along and desires fail. So it's capers.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that was a passage that always befuddled me, and I was glad to hear your take on it.
Just a shot in the dark. I was just to fill everyone in. It talks about, you say, so the quote goes, when one is afraid of heights and then terror is on the road. So you got this ominous, menacing situation. You say you find the consequences, the grasshopper drags itself along, negative, and desire fails. But the other aspect of it is almond trees blossom, which you hear blossom. And if you don't have this background in culinary herbs, you're thinking, well, that's a wonderful thing. So why is there this disjoint? But you were saying, Rita, and I kind of share it, that there's another take on it. You were mentioning the people at Sunrise Morning Show and their perspective on this. Like, how do they interpret this?
Okay, would you repeat that? You just blanked out. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I guess my connection's not the greatest here right now. So what?
No worries. Would you mind explaining why the blossoms of the herb would be a negative thing as opposed to a positive thing?
Well, I don't know that I would think of the blossoms of any herb as a negative thing. Well, here's how I could explain it. Once you need the herb to blossom and the blossom to fall off to produce the fruit. So people see the beautiful blossoms and then they think, oh, they're gone. But because of those blossoms dying, then you have the fruit, just like an apple blossom or an almond. By the way, almonds and I believe pistachios are the two nuts that are mentioned in the Bible. And almonds have, oh my gosh, so much protein, really a wonderful biblical nut to just munch on. So again, there we go. All the good foods that we should be eating that are so trendy now with the Mediterranean diet. I mean, you just go to the good book and you've got, you don't have to spend money on a coach. You just read the Bible and you can get all these good tips about what foods to eat.
Rita, I could talk to you all day about this. I find this is fascinating. So I'm going to encourage our audience to go to your website. The main one is abouteating.com. That's the one you would encourage they visit, Rita? Yes?
That's right.
At EWTN Radio, Rita's quite frequently on some of the programs, like I mentioned, Sunrise Morning Show. So if you go to EWTN, you search for her name, you'll find all kinds of amazing, good content. Just to wrap things up, Rita, if there was one book that you could recommend for our audience, just one. I know there's many amazing ones you mentioned. Which would you choose?
Oh my God.
Sorry.
Cooking with the Saints. I just got that recently. Oh my goodness, it is wonderful. It's, I believe, by the same author who wrote the Vatican cookbook, Chef David. And I love it because it's not only seasonal with months, but then it talks about the saint and the kind of foods that are associated with that saint, and the recipes are workable and doable. Really wonderful. So I guess that comes to mind. I have to tell you real quick too, this is a local book, sort of. Holy Chow and Holy Chow Gluten Free, written by our Archbishop's chef, Giovanna Trimpi. And she is a wonderful Italian cook, born in Venezuela, and found her way to the States with her parents, and has cooked for our archbishops and bishops, as I have, and just wonderful, doable food, a reasonable cost anyway. Yeah, but that Cooking with the Saints is, wow, that's a wonderful book, as is the Vatican Cookbook too. You asked me, I can't choose just one. There you go.
Cheated, Rita. Actually, David Geiser, who's the chef, wanted to be a participant in Love in the Kitchen, but it just didn't work with his schedule. It's in Europe, different time frames, and he's traveling quite a bit because he's so amazing at what he does. So hopefully we'll be able to engage him in some things in the future. And I'm gluten-free. So when I saw that recommendation for Holy Chow and Holy Chow gluten-free, I was quite excited. Yeah, so thank you for bringing my attention to that. Rita, we're going to have to wrap it up because I'm looking at the clock and we need to get ready for our next session. So up next, we're going to have Maura Presler. She's going to be joining us with a guest facilitator. I won't be on for that session, but Kathleen Jones is going to be joining us. So Maura is a former pastry chef, and she's a founder of Made in His Image. So Maura's ministry has been dedicated to helping women overcome eating disorders and recognize their inherent dignity and beauty. And then later on today, I want to remind everyone that Father Leo Padalinghug, who beat Bobby Flay, is going to be cooking a fusion curry stir fry with us. So please come to that session. If you have any friends who will be interested, please invite them, reach out. If you had a good time today with Rita, please share that on social media as well. Our registration is open right up until the end of the event. And many of these things will be rebroadcast if they can't attend the live sessions. And on our website, once you log on, when you go below the schedule, we have over 30 videos from 20 plus speakers who want to share their recipe for holiness with you. So thank you everyone who attended. I hope you have a blessed day. I hope we see you with Maura soon and with Father Leo in the evening. Amy Boardwalk, there's more stuff tomorrow as well. So Rita, thank you. God bless. You're amazing. Thank you for blessing us and sharing your insights on culinary herbs and the Bible. Thank you so much, Rita.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. God bless. See you, everyone. Have a great day.